we're back. How can we reduce absenteeism? One way is to have rewards for attending. Those rewards could be financial. Like you could give people well pay. Just like we have sick pay programs, we might be able to have well pay programs. The state of Washington has that for state employees. If you don't use your sick days during the year, the next year you can sell them back and get the money for them instead. And that's a financial incentive for not missing. You can give financial bonuses if you go some amount of time without a day of absence. Then we give you some kind of financial bonus. It could be you get to play some kind of game. Like those of you who all were not absent this quarter, you all get to spin the roulette wheel and win a prize. Whatever it is, something like that. There are also rewards for attending that could be like giving you some time, because sometimes it's not about income. And especially if you have a salaried employee, it's hard to give, extra pay, for that. That's a little tricky. So what if instead we give you extra time? And so you don't have to call in sick and use a surprising absentee day when what you really have is something that you wanted to go to and it happens to be on a work day. And we offer paid time off programs so you can use that, sort of like the free days that I was telling you about with Southwest Airlines. So you can have some time off for just any reason. It doesn't have to be per se vacation. It doesn't have to per se be sickness. It could be paid time off. And then recognition programs for people who are really diligent attendees is another kind of reward that you could have for attendance. Of course, you could also discipline people who don't attend, right? Punishment, Skinner says 10 rewards for every one punishment. So you do need to have punishment in your bag. So you can have discipline for not attending. And then, of course, for either one of these kinds of things, one of the things that's really super important is have a clear policy on whatever it is, and then really transparent record keeping where the employee and the employer both know the attendance records all the time. And, as an employee or as a student, it's always really important to allow, to let in the case of a student, instructor know, or in the case of an employee, your supervisor know, if you're noticing a discrepancy in the record keeping, right? If you look in your grade book and you notice a missing score, it's contingent on you to tell the instructor that something hasn't been graded yet. Like, are you planning on grading this? I turned it in 3 weeks ago. My son took a class and he had an assignment that just never, ever got graded the entire quarter. And he didn't even notice. I'm like, after the quarter was over and he was 1 percentage point short of getting the grade that you need to be eligible for the next class. I looked at his grades in Canvas and I'm like, why is this one ungraded? And he goes, is it? He had turned it in. You could see the icon, but it had never been graded. It's contingent on students to let their instructors know, I have a missing grade. It's contingent on employees to, in this transparent record keeping scenario, to let the supervisor know, if you see, I see that you marked me absent on X day, but here are the emails. Here's where I was. This is what I was doing. Here's all the evidence I was working. I was not missing that day. I need you to correct that, because this could have repercussions down the line as far as any of these programs that we're talking about, right? Maybe you're out of the running for the reward, or you're on the brink of getting disciplined or something like that. So that's my little tips for how to make sure you get what you're deserving. All right, so some turnover reasons. Why do people leave their jobs? Well, a lot of unavoidable reasons, right? Sometimes people leave work because school starts and their summer job was just a summer job for them, and so it's time to leave. Okay, that makes sense. Maybe they got transferred. Maybe their spouse got transferred, and so now they have to move because their spouse got a transfer. Maybe they're experiencing like a chronic illness, and so they have to find something that is better suited to what their symptoms are. Maybe they've got an injured back or something, and they need to get a job that doesn't involve sitting all day or doesn't involve lifting things all day or things like that. And then other kinds of family issues. Sometimes when people are going through divorce or when somebody in the family is ill or something else that'll cause somebody to have to leave their job. Another reason why people turn over is for advancement opportunities. A lot of times people want more responsibility, they want better pay, they want to advance in their careers. I mean, there are some people who are completely satisfied to find their niche and that's where they are for like 30 years and they're like completely happy because like I found my level and then I get to expand outside of work and do other things, pursue my hobbies, do, my other things. But other people are like, no, I want to keep advancing and I want better pay or I want more responsibility or whatever comes from advancing. Maybe they have some other kinds of unmet needs. Maybe there's something about this job that isn't giving them what they need. Maybe it's not enough recognition or it's not high enough status or it's an organization that they're not proud to say that they work for and they want to work for some place where when they tell their friends all go, wow, that's really a great place to work. Who knows? There are a lot of reasons why a person might become dissatisfied with that organization. Maybe they want to get away from something specific in this organization. It could be people. It could be the working conditions, right? I was satisfied being a waitress, but when we made a move, because my beloved got transferred, I said to him, I was working my way through college, and I said, I don't know if I want to be a waitress working my way through college anymore. I think I'm tired of coming home smelling like fried food all the time. My last job as a waitress was at a really nice Mexican restaurant down in Florida, and it was a really, really nice place to work, honestly. But I just was like, I think I've gotten everything out of this waitressing thing that I can get. I want to transition into like an office job where I won't come home smelling like fried food. I don't have to wear a uniform. I thought that was like so constraining. And then when I was dressing for work, I was like, where's my uniform? It's hard to think of what to wear every day. But sometimes it's the conditions. I was just kind of tired of being in a restaurant. And so I didn't leave because I didn't like the restaurant. Like I would have stayed there if we hadn't moved, honestly. But because we moved, I thought that'd be a really good time to like freshen up and do something different. Stress. Sometimes in a workplace is stressful. Maybe it's because of the people. Maybe it's because of the working conditions, but maybe it's what you're doing, right? It could be that the tasks that you're engaging in are stressful. So thought I'd throw that in. And then there are also like unmet expectations that might be coming because of how this organization is. You thought it was going to be one way and it turns out to be something else. Or you thought the job was going to be one thing and it turned out to be something else. Or it's not enough of what you wanted. Maybe the whole career. Maybe you've picked the wrong field. I see students all the time who are like, I'm back in school because I picked the wrong thing the first time. So sometimes it's a change, it's not a turnover from this job, it's a turnover from this career. So there are a lot of reasons why people turn over, I think. You probably knew a lot of this stuff, but I'll bet you never listed it all like this because there are just so many reasons why people might turn over. All right, so let's shift gears into some additional job attitudes. And I've got 3 that I'm going to address. Job involvement and work centrality. So our little cartoon says, I'm not a workaholic. I just work to relax. For some people, working on vacation makes a ton of sense. Perceived organizational support. So my little cartoon says, if you work 24 hours a day, you won't need your apartment and that will save you a lot of money. And that's the same thing as getting a raise. Perceived organizational support seems low in that context. And then the last category is emotions in the workplace. And the boss is saying, I don't want to hear your problems, Hawkins. Take your troubles 5 doors down to our for crying out loud department. Expressing emotions in the workplace. All right, so let's jump in. So job involvement and work centrality. So job involvement really is talking about how cognitively engaged you are at work. It offsets the effects of job insecurity for a lot of people. If they feel cognitively challenged by their job, they're like, well, it's okay that I'm not completely sure that this job will be around all the time or that whatever. That's okay. I'm engaged and I really like it. One risk that we run is that a person goes from cognitive engagement and really liking it to workaholic, where they just are enjoying the stimulation of work so much and they are so involved in it that it becomes their life. They aren't spending time with their family. They aren't doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. In fact, some people who are behaving like workaholics, at least, I can't say that they're true workaholics, because some people are hiding in work. Some people are avoiding their other important life roles by saying, well, but I'm at work. I have to put a roof over our head and food in our mouths. Like, I'm at work. You can't judge me for that. But the truth is they're hiding from other things. So I'm going to throw that one in. But what we're trying to talk about generally here is what we call enthusiastic workaholics. They are driven by their work. They are involved in their work. They enjoy their work, and it's what they do. And I have to say, I'm in that category. I love what I do for a living. I play with my PowerPoints all the time. I'm always trying to improve and do different things on my breaks. I record lectures. I'm like always doing it because I like it. And so I don't think I'm hiding from other important life roles. I'd probably be the last one to know, Freud would say. Work centrality is the degree to which the work is important in the employee's life. How important is your job in your life? And it really develops out of your socialization. Some people have been raised to see their work identity as the primary thing. What do you do for a living is a really common question in the US. In a lot of Western cultures, like, what do you do is the number one question, because that's sort of like, work is central to us. And so it's part of not just individual socialization that your parents may have given you. It's sort of a cultural thing that you might have internalized from having been raised in the US if you were. It's related to affective commitment. A lot of times people who see their job as really super central to their identity will then have that kind of affective commitment where, well, if the job is my identity, then clearly the people I work with are related to that. So they must be related to me, and hey, they're family. So you see a lot of affective commitment stuff coming out of work centrality. In one meta-analysis, they found that work centrality was positively related to salary level. People who experience more work centrality experience more pay, the number of promotions, and then general career satisfaction. And so having this sense that work is a really important part of our sense of self literally pays off in the long run. So job involvement, work centrality, and organizational commitment are moderately intercorrelated at 0.25 to 0.45. So all these things that we've been talking about so far in this chapter are all related to each other, all correlated. Now, perceived organizational support is really the employee's beliefs about whether the organization values their contributions and cares about their well-being. So there are some antecedents to perceived organizational support. One is fair procedures. If an employee perceives that the organization is not fair in its doling out of tasks and it's doling out of rewards and all those things, they're much less likely to think that the organization really cares about them. So fair procedures are an important antecedent. Supervisor support, having a supervisor who seems to care if you're there, checks on you if you're sick, checks up on you to make sure that you have everything that you need to succeed with your tasks, things like that make a person believe that the organization really cares about them. Favorable rewards, not only pay, but also maybe time off or whatever other things would make a person feel like the organization is recognizing what they need. And then finally, the job conditions. If the organization is like, climb out on that really tiny pole and don't worry, we've got a harness on you. You're fine. Climb out on there and get that thing for us. You might feel like, I feel expendable. It feels like, you don't really care if I fall off of this. But on the other hand, if the job conditions are more favorable, you may come to the conclusion that the organization made them more favorable because they care about you and about your well-being. Now, the consequences of feeling like you're supported by your organization is increased commitment, increased performance, and a lower likelihood of the various withdrawal behaviors that we've been talking about. So if an organization can take little small steps, this is one of the things that we've been doing to reach out to our students to help them to know that their instructors do care if they're coming to class, that their instructors do care if they register for next quarter and things like that. It's based on this premise that the university is here to support the students as they're moving through in their pursuit of their degree, And it can lead, if we're doing it properly, it can lead the students to feeling more committed to their university. They perform better and they're less likely to drop out or take a big break. So I always say that students are a good model for employees, and that's absolutely true. Perceived organizational support is strongly related to satisfaction, commitment, turnover intentions, and behaviors as far as all these things on the left. And then high perceived organizational support supervisors tend to be more supportive of their subordinates, and that leads to improved employee attitudes and performance. If you feel like your supervisor has your back, you tend to be more loyal to the organization and you perform better. All right, the final thing before I will send you to watch a video and be done is emotions at work. Emotional regulation, I think we already talked about this, how we monitor our emotions and manage our emotions. Sometimes our workplace requires certain emotions to be displayed. So amplification describes those kinds of job situations where maybe you're supposed to fake or at least exaggerate a pleasant emotion. It turns out a lot of people who I was raised in Anaheim, California, just right across the way from Disneyland. And so a lot of my classmates in high school and stuff worked at Disneyland. And they would complain about the fact that at Disneyland, even if you're like sweeping up the little bits of garbage on the ground, which you have to pick up the second it hits the ground, you're supposed to always seem pleasant. You're supposed to be smiling or at least pleasant. And they were saying, how onerous this was to have to always seem pleasant. But what the research shows is if you fake an emotion, you tend to actually score higher on that emotion after doing it than you did before you started faking the emotion. So if you were to even just take a pencil and put it in your mouth, and the job is to not touch it with your lips. Can't touch the pencil. If you hold the pencil for a while, you'll find that you actually feel better, because guess what that is? Fake smile. Same thing if we glue some golf tees to your forehead and tell you your job is to try and touch them. You have to go like this to try and touch them. That kind of frowning, you will actually experience a more negative emotion. So if we ask you to fake a positive emotion, it shouldn't be surprising that people who have faked a positive emotion tend to have greater job satisfaction in the long run. Now, suppression, where you have to hide jealousy, anger, things like that. If you have to hide something, that can lead to job dissatisfaction. So if you're just exaggerating a pleasant emotion, you're probably going to have better job satisfaction overall, because you're going to have less of the dissatisfaction, like murkying up your responses. So exaggerating is probably better than faking a positive emotion, because if you're faking a positive emotion, you're probably hiding a negative one. So that's my little caveat on the links between those two. Now, emotional labor describes the energy it takes to express the desired emotions during interpersonal interactions. So this is not just about whether you're smiling at customers. This is always also about, like, maybe you have to have a discussion with your supervisor and you don't want to come off as angry, or you don't want to come off as weak, or you don't want to come off in a negative way. And so you're having to express energy to try and make sure that you're displaying what you want to display and not displaying what you don't want to display. That's emotional labor. And it could be just on dealing with a coworker. It could be talking to a supervisor. It could be dealing with clients. And then emotional dissonance is where your actual feelings are different from the emotions being projected on the job. So like I said, with the amplification versus suppression, if you're faking a positive emotion and suppressing a negative emotion, this would be emotional dissonance. This leads to higher levels of stress and burnout, because it takes a lot of effort to fake a positive and suppress a negative, right? In fact, in the efforts to try and project that you are having a positive emotion while trying to repress your negative emotion, it leads to poorer customer service. So if you have a person who's actually experiencing a negative emotion, but they've been ordered to project a positive emotion, it seems to bleed through to the customers who you're providing customer service to. You probably have had interactions with customer service where you could tell full well that they are at their wits' end. So that tends to be associated with more stress and burnout, and it doesn't achieve the goal that we have for telling you to mask your emotions anyway, because the customer can figure it out. So probably not good advice to tell people to like smile while you're on the phone, even though you're really mad from the last call that was really mean to you. You know, it's just probably not helpful. So I thought I'd leave you in the playlist with an example of a person trying to regulate their emotions in the business setting. So enjoy that. And just remember that these are, the things that I was hoping that we would walk away with by the end of chapter 10. All right, I'll see you in the next chapter.